while my husband was in the kitchen cooking oxtail and humming love songs, like the perfect man he pretended to be. His phone lit up on the counter. A message from his intern boss, "I miss you." I did not scream. I did not cry. I picked up his phone, unlocked it with our wedding date, and typed a reply he never saw coming. "Come over. My wife is not home tonight." And when that doorbell finally rang and my husband saw who was standing on the other side, his whole face collapsed. My name is Ayana, and tonight I turn my husband's affair into a quiet war inside our own home. If you are watching this, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. I still remember the smell before everything shattered. Slow-cooked oxtail, garlic, and thyme, the kind of rich, heavy scent that wraps around you and tells your nervous system you are safe, you are loved, you are home. Our apartment in Buckhead glowed the way it always does on weeknights: warm lamps, city lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, jazz and soft R&B on the speaker. Marcellus stood in the open kitchen wearing the navy apron I bought him for our second anniversary, the one that says "King of the Kitchen" in gold script. He was humming along to some love song, shoulder moving with the rhythm as he stirred the pot. "You have no idea how spoiled you are, Mrs. Knight," he called over his shoulder, his voice playful. "Men out there barely wash their own dishes. Meanwhile, you have a man who closes million-dollar deals by day and slow cooks oxtail by night." I pretended to smile, flipping the page of the architecture magazine in my hands. But the truth is, my heart was not even in my chest anymore. It had died sometime last week in front of a laptop screen full of bank statements and credit card transactions that did not add up. Before that, I used to melt whenever he said things like that. I used to believe them. We built this life together from nothing. 6 years ago, we were living in a tiny studio on the outskirts of Atlanta. Mattress on the floor, mismatched plates, counting coins at the end of the month. Marcellus used to hold my face in his hands and swear, "I am going to work until my bones ache so you can have everything." And he did. The promotions came. The bonuses. The move to Buckhead, the high-rise with the concierge and the gym that smells like eucalyptus. New furniture, vacations, a walk-in closet that finally looked like the Pinterest boards I used to save. From the outside, we are the couple people point at and say, "That is goals." Inside that night, I sat on the cream sofa, magazine open but unread, and watched my husband cook like he was still the man I used to pray for. And all I felt was a cold, hard layer of contempt pressed over whatever love was left. He did not know that I already knew. That I had spent 3 nights in a row with our joint accounts, tracing charges like a detective. The dinners he called client meetings. The Uber rides to neighborhoods he never mentioned. The hotel transaction in Midtown on a Tuesday night when he swore he had fallen asleep at the office. The worst part was not even the money. It was the confirmation that the little voice in my gut had been telling the truth while my brain was busy decorating over it. So when his phone lit up on the marble counter, I was not caught off guard. I was already broken, just very, very calm about it. It was a small sound, just that soft buzz against stone. But in the quiet between songs, it sounded like a gun cocking. I saw it out of the corner of my eye, the lock screen flaring bright. His iPhone lay face up right next to the cutting board. His hands were busy at the stove, stirring the pot, adding a splash of something from a glass bottle, completely oblivious. For a second, I told myself, "Do not look, Ayana. If you look, you cannot unsee." But then I remembered the way my hands had shaken over the bank statements, and I realized something my heart could not break any further. There was nothing left to protect. So I set the magazine down, slowly stretched like I was just shifting positions, stood up and walked toward the kitchen. My bare feet made almost no sound on the hardwood. The city outside was a smear of lights behind him. He did not turn around. "You want to taste the sauce?" he asked. "I think I finally got your mama's spice level right this time." "In a minute," I said softly. My voice sounded normal. "That is the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. The world does not go slow motion and guitars do not start wailing in the background. You just keep talking, breathing, moving while something deep inside folds in on itself. The name on the notification was exactly who I expected. Kailani. No last name on his phone. Just the little flower emoji he must have put there himself. I already knew who she was. The new intern at his firm. 23. Pretty in that hungry, unpolished way. He had mentioned her a few weeks back over brunch. The new intern is actually impressive, he said between bites of avocado toast. Quick on her feet. Polite. Reminds me of us when we were starting out. I had smiled then, even joked, so you found your mini-me. I had no idea how accurate that would become, just not in the way I thought. Now her name glowed on his screen. Under it, the message, "Boss, I miss you." 4 words. Simple. 100 knives wrapped inside. I did not feel the usual explosion of jealousy people talk about. There was no burst of heat. My hurt had been pre-cooked. What washed over me instead was a strange, icy clarity. My body moved before my mind even finished forming the thought. I picked up his phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. The passcode box blinked up at me, almost coy. 4 empty circles. I did not hesitate. Month, day, year. Our wedding date. The numbers slid in smooth and the phone unlocked with a soft click, like a joke only I could hear. His loyalty might have been elsewhere, but his password was still the day he promised to be mine. It made me want to laugh and throw up at the same time. I did not open the message thread. I did not need to scroll through all the hearts and late-night confessions to know they were there. I already knew too much. What I needed tonight was something different. Not proof. Leverage. A stage. So I tapped reply right from the notification, my eyes flicking once toward Marcellus to make sure he was still facing the stove. He was shoulders relaxed, humming along completely unaware that his life was about to split into a before and after. The keyboard popped up. For a second, my fingers hovered. My heartbeat sounded loud in my ears, but it was not fear. It was anticipation, the steady breathing of a hunter who has finally spotted the deer. Then I typed, "Come over. My wife isn't home tonight." I looked at the sentence for a fraction of a second, then hit send before I could romanticize it or soften it or back out. The little blue bubble flew off into the ether, carrying my invitation and my trap with it. There was a strange stillness in me afterwards. I took a screenshot of the screen, the message sitting there in the thread like a loaded gun. I pressed the side buttons, felt the tiny flicker as the image saved. Then casually, I opened messages and forwarded that screenshot to my own phone, to my own number, saved as home. Our wedding date still sat in the top corner of the screen, mocking him, comforting me. Proof that his betrayal would be his own undoing. After the picture appeared on my phone across the room, I went back into his, deleted the outgoing message preview from the lock screen, cleared the little banner. Not the actual text, of course. I wanted that to stay. Just enough so he would not notice anything had happened until it was too late. I set his phone down exactly where it had been. Same angle, same distance from the cutting board. I even nudged it a millimeter, so the shadow lined up with the salt grinder like before. If you are going to stage a scene, the props have to be perfect. My hands were shaking a little, not from panic, but from the sheer intensity of holding in everything I wanted to say. I walked back to the sofa, picked up my magazine, flipped a page like nothing in the world had changed. In the kitchen, Marcellus turned and smiled at me, spoon in hand, forehead, shining just a little from the heat of the stove. "I swear once this promotion comes through, I'm hiring a private chef so I can just focus on eating with you," he joked. I stared at him for a moment, this man who once slept on mattresses on the floor with me, who now had a secret life threaded through our shared one. In that moment, he looked like two people superimposed, the boy I married and the stranger stirring the pot. "Smells amazing," I said. My tone was warm. My eyes must have looked normal. He turned back to the stove satisfied. In my head, I was counting. Depending on where she was coming from, it would take Kailani 30 to 45 minutes to get to our building. Maybe less, if she was already nearby sitting in her car like a loyal dog waiting for the whistle. Long enough for me to eat the dinner my cheating husband cooked, long enough to watch him play the role of perfect man one more time. Then, when the doorbell rang, we would see who he really was. I sat back down on the sofa, pretending to read while my mind moved with a level of clarity I had not tasted in years. It is strange how betrayal sharpens you. The same woman who used to overlook inconsistencies, make excuses smooth over arguments with logic and forgiveness, that woman was gone. In her place was someone colder, quieter, frighteningly patient. Someone who understood timing. Someone who understood consequences. While the R and B song faded into another track, I kept my breathing steady and watched my husband move around our kitchen like he was auditioning for a commercial. He plated the food, beautifully wiped the rims of the dishes with a cloth, lit a small candle without asking because he thought he knew romance. He thought he knew me. He thought I was the kind of woman who would see the candle and soften, forget the long nights alone, forget the late meetings that lasted too long, forget the second phone he thought I never found. He brought the plates to the dining table, calling my name like nothing inside our life was leaking. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked over. He pulled out my chair like a gentleman, sat across from me, and smiled that smile that once made me feel cared for. Now, it looked like a costume. Every mannerism, every gesture suddenly felt like something he had practiced on someone else first. I picked up my fork and tasted the oxtail because dignity mattered to me. If I was going to destroy the illusion tonight, I would do it quietly with a calmness he could never predict. The flavor was perfect. Exactly how my mother taught him years ago. And that hurt more than anything. How dare he learn her recipe just to turn around and give his affection to someone else? He talked as he ate, rambling about office politics, the forecast for the next quarter, how his team might be chosen for a national project, how this was the year everything changed for us. He said those words for us, and for a moment, something inside me twisted. It was not love. It was grief for the woman who used to believe every promise that came out of his mouth. I nodded at all the right moments, made eye contact when necessary, even smiled once so he would not become suspicious. The last thing I needed was for him to start checking his phone early. I kept looking at the time on the stove clock. Each minute felt like a grain of sand dropping into a glass chamber. 38 minutes after I sent the message, my phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced down. A number I did not know, but the preview was enough. On my way. Short. Eager. Naive. I put the phone face down and kept eating. Marcellus did not notice a thing. This man could read the fine print of a contract, but could not read his own wife sitting 3 feet away from him. When dinner ended, he told me he had a surprise for dessert. Something he ordered earlier this week. I almost laughed. The irony of him planning surprises on the same night he was about to face one himself was almost poetic. I told him I was too full and that I just wanted to relax for a bit. He seemed slightly disappointed, but tried to hide it behind that charming half-smile he always used. We moved to the living room. He sat close to me on the sofa, arm draped behind my shoulders, the scent of his cologne warm and familiar. Too familiar. I leaned slightly away without making it obvious. He did not notice that either. I kept glancing at the door, waiting for the moment everything would collide. My instincts sharpened. I could hear the elevator ding at the end of the hallway. Footsteps. A pause. The soft shuffle of someone smoothing their clothing. My body tightened, my pulse suddenly steady instead of fast. Calm. Cold. Ready. He asked me something about a design project I'd been considering for months, but before I could answer the sound I'd been waiting for cut through the apartment. The doorbell rang. 3 short chimes. Clear. Unavoidable. A sound that landed like the opening shot of a war. Marcellus blinked, confused. His eyebrows pulled together, and he looked at the door, then at me as if I had secretly planned company. His voice cracked slightly. "Who is that at this hour?" He said it casually, but his tone betrayed him. Just a hint of worry, barely there but present. I pretended to look equally puzzled. I set my magazine on the coffee table and stood slowly smoothing my dress again. "Sit," I said gently. "I will get it." The way I said it made even me pause. It came out smooth, even-toned, but with a firmness he could not argue with. His mouth opened like he might offer to check, but something in my eyes must have warned him. He stayed seated. I walked toward the door, each step steady, quiet, deliberate. My hands did not shake. My breathing did not change. I was in complete control. The hallway light pushed a bright outline around the doorframe, casting me in a long shadow as I reached for the handle. For a split second, I imagined what she must look like on the other side. Perfume sprayed too heavy, lip gloss fresh, hair curled, heart racing with excitement she thought was love. Maybe she rehearsed something cute to say when he opened the door. Maybe she imagined him pulling her inside with urgency. It almost made me pity her. Almost. I unlocked the deadbolt. The click echoed through the quiet apartment like a verdict. Then I turned the handle and pulled the door open. And there she was. Kailani. Young, dressed for a date. Makeup too perfect. Holding a small box of cupcakes like a peace offering or a bribe or a promise. Her smile died instantly when she saw me. The hope drained out of her face so fast it left her pale like someone had opened a window and sucked the warmth out of her body. I did not say a word. I just looked at her. And in the silence, something inside her broke. She knew. She knew she had not walked into romance. She had walked straight into judgment. Straight into consequence. Straight into me. I stepped back just enough to let the hallway light spill into our apartment. Then very softly, I said, "Come in," and the real night began. Kailani stepped inside the apartment like someone entering a courtroom, not a home. She moved slowly, almost stumbling over the threshold, clutching that little cupcake box as if it could shield her from what was coming. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing her fate inside our immaculate living room, and for a moment I simply let the silence stretch. It wrapped around her like a choke chain. Her eyes darted from the marble floors to the designer rug to the soft glow of our lamps, trying to absorb the space she had only fantasized about. She probably pictured herself here in some alternate universe, laughing on our sofa, sipping wine belonging. And now she stood in the middle of it as an intruder. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a tiny breath escaped. I watched her throat tighten, watched her swallow hard like she was trying not to vomit. Before I could take another step, Marcellus called from the sofa, his voice tight. "Who is it, babe?" I did not answer. I simply tilted my head toward the living room and said loud enough for both of them to hear, "You can come in, Kailani." The name struck her like a slap. She flinched, her eyes widening even further. Behind me on the sofa, I heard Marcellus shift violently, like someone had yanked a rug from under him. He stood halfway, froze, then slowly lowered himself back down as if gravity had doubled. Good. Let him sweat. I stepped aside, letting her walk further in. She moved with the stiffness of a puppet, each step hesitant, timid, trying to make herself small. It was almost impressive how quickly she seemed to shrink under the weight of reality. When we reached the living room, I gestured toward the single armchair across from the sofa. "Sit." She obeyed instantly, perching on the edge like her body might fall apart if she relaxed even an inch. Her knees pressed tightly together, hands gripping the cupcake box and her lap knuckles pale. I could smell her perfume now, something sweet and cheap, too sugary for a grown woman. The kind of scent a girl picks when she wants to feel irresistible. I sat on the sofa beside Marcellus, but slightly angled toward her. Marcellus looked as if he had been drained of all blood. His face was rigid, mouth slightly open, eyes flicking between us like he was watching a bomb timer count down. I crossed my legs, rested my hands in my lap, and smiled the kind of smile women only use when they already know everything. She tried to gather herself, inhaled shakily, and attempted a greeting. "Hi, Mrs. Knight?" I blinked once slowly. "Kailani, why are you here?" I asked calmly. That one question was enough to make her crumble. She glanced at Marcellus for support, but he refused to meet her eyes. A flash of betrayal crossed her face. She had expected protection, a hand to hold reassurance. She did not realize until this very moment that she had misread the entire script. She stumbled over her words. I heard Marcellus was feeling unwell earlier this week. I thought I would pass by and check on him. And bring these." She lifted the cupcake box like it mattered, like it explained everything. I leaned forward just half an inch, pretending curiosity. "You baked for my husband?" I asked. "No, I bought them," she said quickly. "I was just being thoughtful." Thoughtful. I repeated it, letting the word roll off my tongue with a softness that somehow made it sound like an indictment. Marcellus shifted, rubbing his palms on his knees. Sweat glistened at his temples. I did not look at him. My focus stayed rooted on the young woman trembling across from me. "Tell me something, Kailani. How often do interns bring desserts to married men?" At 8 o'clock at night, her chest rose sharply, air catching in her throat. No, I mean, it was a coincidence. I happened to be nearby. "Buckhead is not on the way to anywhere," I said quietly. "So try again." Her eyes filled with tears instantly. Not the dramatic kind, but the panicked, humiliated kind. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back. I could see the moment she realized there was no version of this conversation where she walked out with dignity. She whispered, "Mrs. Knight, I swear I did not mean any disrespect. I never wanted to cause problems." I looked at her for a long, still moment, letting her drown in her own words. Then I finally leaned back, placed an elbow on the armrest, and crossed one leg over the other. "Kailani," I said gently, "I know exactly why you are here." Her breath hitched. I could see the plea in her eyes, the silent begging for a lie to cover her. A story to escape into. But I was not offering lies tonight. I lifted my chin slightly. "Let me ask you something. When you sent my husband the message last week saying that you missed him, what exactly did you miss?" She froze. The box of cupcakes slipped from her fingers and hit her lap with a soft thump. Behind me, Marcellus let out a noise so small it barely counted as a sound, but guilt throbbed inside it. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand slightly without even looking at him, and he fell silent. Kailani stared at me with eyes so wide they looked painful. I waited. I gave her the silence, the rope, the room to confess or hang herself. Her lips trembled. It was a joke," she whispered. "A joke." I let that sink for a moment. She nodded desperately. "Yes, like office banter. Just harmless fun." "Harmless," I said quietly. Then I uncrossed my legs, leaned forward, and placed both feet firmly on the floor. "Kailani, let me make something very clear. When a single woman messages a married man, 'I miss you,' it is not harmless. When she shows up at his house at night, it is not harmless. When she dresses like she expects him to open the door, it is not harmless." Finally, her eyes dropped. Shame overtook fear. Good. Shame was a language she clearly understood. I continued, my tone still calm. "What I want to know is simple. Did you come here tonight because you thought he would let you in, or because you already have before her head shot up horrified? No. Hmm. Mrs. I knew she was telling the truth about that part, but I also knew she had imagined this moment many times. And that was enough. I stood slowly smoothing the front of my dress again and walked toward the kitchen without another word. I could feel both of their eyes on my back, the tension so thick it felt like humidity in the room. I opened a cabinet, pulled out a single plastic cup, filled it with water, and returned. The silence followed me like a shadow. I placed the cup gently in front of her. Here. Hydrate. You look like you might pass out. She stared at the cheap plastic cup the way someone might stare at a gravestone with their name already carved into it. She knew exactly what message I was sending. And that was when the real fear began. The look on Kailani's face when she saw the plastic cup was almost poetic. Her eyes flicked between it and the porcelain mugs on the coffee table, the ones Marcellus and I always used, the ones with thin gold rims and delicate handles. She didn't have to be told the symbolism. Women always read the subtext, the hierarchy, the place they hold or don't hold in a man's life. She reached out with trembling fingers, wrapped both hands around the cheap cup like she needed its warmth even though it was just cold tap water. Her throat bobbed as she forced a sip, her lipstick staining the rim. I sat down again, deliberately choosing the seat next to Marcellus, folding one leg over the other with slow precision. The room felt small, like the walls had quietly moved closer. Marcellus kept rubbing his palms on his thighs, his breath shallow as if he might pass out before she did. I didn't look at him. I wasn't ready to address my husband yet. That part of the night was coming, but not now. Not while the little girl who helped tear my marriage apart still sat trembling on my furniture. I tilted my head, studying Kailani the way a scientist studies a specimen. Up close, she looked even younger. Baby hairs slicked down at her temples. Lip gloss too shiny. The little necklace with her name on it, K, glittering cheap gold against her throat. She had dressed up for what she thought would be a secret, intimate rendezvous. And now, here she was, wilted under the lamplight, every fantasy dissolving into humiliation. "Speak, Kailani," I said finally, my voice soft. "Tell me the version of tonight you expected." She inhaled sharply, her eyes darting again to Marcellus, but he stared at the rug-jaw, tight shame burning through him. He wouldn't save her, and I knew the moment she realized that. Her shoulders curled inward. I thought he wanted to see me," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word, and the fragility of it made something cold bloom inside me. "And why," I asked calmly, without raising my voice, "would you think a married man wanted to see you at night?" "I don't know," she said, tears filling her eyes. "I thought he was going through a hard time and I wanted to be there for him." "A hard time," I repeated. "Is that what he told you?" "He told me he had been stressed," she said, looking down at her flickering hands, "and that things at home had been tense." My lips curled at the edges, not a smile, but something close. Interesting. I wasn't aware my husband was sharing the state of our marriage with interns. Marcellus jerked like I had slapped him, his eyes shooting up to meet mine. He opened his mouth, but again I didn't let him speak. "That's enough from you," I said quietly, and he closed his mouth like a scolded child. I turned back to her. "Did he tell you we were having problems?" "No," she said quickly. "No, he didn't say that. He just said he felt misunderstood." "Misunderstood," I repeated, letting the words sink like a stone at the bottom of a lake. She nodded miserably. "And he said he felt appreciated at work." Appreciated. My voice stayed soft, but the air in the room changed. The temperature dropped. "Tell me, Kailani, how exactly did you show your appreciation?" She froze. She wasn't prepared for the directness. I leaned forward a little. Was it the compliments, the late-night messages, the lingering in his office, the touching his arm when you laughed her face turned crimson? No, she whispered. It wasn't like that. Then explain it to me, I said, because I want to understand exactly what made you think you could send a married man a message saying, I miss you. Silence. A suffocating silence. Tears spilled, finally sliding down her cheeks. I knew she wasn't crying out of guilt. She was crying because she had been caught, because the fantasy had collapsed, because she was sitting across from the woman she thought she could replace. I let her cry. I watched without pity. When the tears slowed, I sat back and spoke in a tone so gentle it nearly sounded like comfort. You're young, I said, and young women often mistake attention for affection. They confuse mentorship with intimacy. They confuse a man's stress with emotional availability. And they confuse their own desire with destiny. She nodded through her tears, unable to lift her eyes. But here is the truth, I continued. A man will tell you every story in the world to justify stepping outside his marriage. He will tell you he's lonely. He will tell you he's misunderstood. He will tell you he's falling apart. But you know what he will never tell you, that you are temporary. Her shoulders shook with a silent sob. I lowered my voice even more. Did Marcellus ever tell you he was leaving me? Her sobbing paused. She looked up, startled, shaking her head violently. No, never. I nodded. Of course he didn't. They never do. Another long moment passed before I asked the question I had been waiting for. Kaylani, did you come here tonight because you loved him, or because you wanted to feel chosen? She looked at me like I had peeled her open, like I had reached inside her chest and squeezed the truth out of her lungs. Her voice was barely audible. I think I just wanted to feel like I mattered. And there it was. The admission. The raw, pathetic core of every doomed affair. You do matter, I said quietly. Just not here. Not in this home. Not in this marriage. Not in this story. She closed her eyes, tears falling again, but softer now, less panicked. More like mourning. I stood. She flinched when I moved, as if she expected me to scream, to throw something, to slap her. But I simply walked to the console table by the window, picked up a tissue box and set it gently beside her. She took one with shaking hands. Behind me, Marcellus let out a long, unsteady breath, like he was realizing how deep a hole he had dug himself into. I turned to him finally, not addressing him, not forgiving him, just acknowledging he still existed. We will talk later, I said. His entire body deflated. I looked at Kailani one more time. Compose yourself. We're not finished yet. And the way her eyes widened told me she finally understood that this night was not even close to over. Kailani dabbed at her eyes with the tissue, but her hand shook so badly the paper rustled like leaves in a storm. She kept her gaze fixed on her lap, unable to look up, as if meeting my eyes might shatter whatever fragile composure she had left. I let her sit there a moment longer, letting the pounding silence drive deeper into her consciousness. Fear is far more effective when it has room to breathe. I walked toward the bar cart in the corner, poured myself a glass of sparkling water, and took a slow sip, giving her time to feel the weight of her mistake. She probably thought I was stalling. I wasn't. I was strategizing. The slower I moved, the more she unraveled. When I finally turned back to her, she flinched at the sound of my heels on the floor. Sit up straight, I said softly. We are having a conversation, not a confession booth. She jerked her spine, straight, blinking quickly to clear the tears from her lashes. Good. If she was going to sit in my living room after texting my husband, I miss you, she would do it with posture at the very least. Marcellus sat beside me like a statue made of guilt and sweat. His knee bounced uncontrollably, his fingers twitching as if some part of him was still hoping this was a nightmare. I finally acknowledged him, just a glance, nothing more. Marcellus, I said calmly, Did you know she was coming tonight? His head snapped up. No, absolutely not. His voice cracked and he swallowed hard. I swear, Ayana, I didn't know. I cut him off with a raised hand. I am not asking for your innocence. I am asking for your awareness. Did you know she planned to see you? His mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. The absence of words told its own story. I turned back to Kailani. Did he tell you to come here tonight? She shook her head urgently. No, he didn't. I thought he would be happy to see me. Happy. The word was a dagger wrapped in lace. And why exactly did you think my husband would be happy to see you at night? I asked, my voice still gentle, still deadly. Because of the things he said, she whispered. I let a few beats pass. What things? Her chest rose sharply, breath-catching. I don't want to get him in trouble. I smiled without warmth. Sweetheart, he is already in trouble. Just answer the question. She hesitated, her eyes darting again to him, searching for guidance he could not give. He looked away, jaw clenched. Finally, she spoke, voice small as dust. He said I made him feel seen. My fingers tightened around my glass. Seen. The overlooked wife trope. How original. And did you believe him? I asked. She nodded. Yes. I believed him. I stepped closer, just one silent stride, and she shrank back into the chair as if I had struck her. And tell me, what did you think he saw in you? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't know how to answer without insulting herself. I watched her squirm for a long moment, then spoke quietly. I'll tell you what he saw. Youth. Availability. Validation. The illusion of escape. That's it. She inhaled sharply, her face folding into something that looked like pain. I did not soften. Men like him do not choose girls like you for futures, I continued. They choose you for distraction, for ego, for comfort when they don't want to fix what is broken inside themselves. She shook her head, tears dripping steadily now. I wasn't trying to take him away. I wasn't trying to be a homewrecker. I just wanted to matter, I finished for her. She nodded helplessly. Yes, I wanted to matter to someone. I let out a slow breath, not pity, but recognition of a pathetic truth. And did you think sleeping with another woman's husband would give you meaning? No, she whispered. It just happened. Nothing just happens, I said. Attraction is a choice. Phone calls are a choice. Secrets are a choice. Showing up here is a choice. She flinched again, gripping the edges of her chair so tightly her knuckles whitened. I walked back to the sofa and sat slowly, crossing my legs with elegance she could only imitate. Let's talk about the message you sent, I said softly. Her breath froze. The one that said you missed him. Her eyes filled again, panic returning like a flood. I watched her drown in her own guilt before adding, and let's talk about the message you received tonight. Her mouth dropped open. She looked from me to Marcellus in horror, like maybe, just maybe, she still believed he had written that reply. Marcellus paled so dramatically, I almost heard his heart stop. I let the silence sharpen the moment, then spoke with a calm, cutting precision. You received a message from his phone saying come over. My wife isn't home tonight. She nodded slowly, terrified. That message, I said, leaning forward just enough that she felt my presence like a shadow on her skin, did not come from your lover. It came from me. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her face drained of color. Her mouth opened, opened again. You sent that, her voice cracked into a whisper. Yes. I picked up his phone while he cooked dinner. I unlocked it with our wedding date. And I invited you here. Her hand flew to her chest as if trying to hold her heart in place. Why? Why would you do that? I stood again, but this time I didn't move toward her. I moved toward the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline glowing against the night. Because I believe in clarity, I said quietly, and the best way to expose something rotten is to bring it into the light. I turned, meeting her eyes with the full force of my composure. I wanted to see exactly what he was risking our marriage for. I wanted to see the girl he was willing to lie for, and I wanted you to see the wife he would never leave. She let out a small broken sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she whispered. I shook my head gently. Intentions don't erase consequences. Then I walked back toward her slowly, deliberately. And the truth is, Kailani, you were never the real problem. Her brows knitted in confusion. I leaned in just enough for my voice to land like a whisper sharp as ice. The real problem is him. And tonight, after you leave, he and I are going to have a very different kind of conversation. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid for him. Good. Fear I could work with, because we were nowhere near finished. When I told her the real problem was him, not her, something in the room shifted. The air tightened around all three of us, almost humming with a tension none of us were prepared for. Kailani sat frozen, her small frame trembling as if she were waiting for a sentence to be handed down. Marcellus, on the other hand, looked like a man standing barefoot on broken glass, realizing too late he had walked into a minefield he laid himself. I leaned back into the sofa, crossing my arms loosely, and let the silence settle again. Silence is a tool. Most people rush to fill it, but silence makes truth louder. Kailani finally whispered, What happens now, Mrs. Knight?" Her voice cracked in the middle like she already knew the answer wouldn't favor her. I exhaled softly, letting my gaze drift over her tear-stained cheeks, messy mascara, that cheap necklace trembling with her pulse. She looked like a child who had wandered into a world meant for adults. But this was not my job to fix. It was my job to finish. What happens now, I said slowly, is honesty. No more fantasies. No more excuses. No more texting married men at midnight, hoping to feel something. She dropped her gaze again, shame washing over her like a tide she couldn't stand against. I turned to Marcellus. My husband. My partner. The man who promised me forever and delivered deception instead. Marcellus, I said, my voice still calm, still terrifying him. Since she came all the way here, perhaps you should tell her the truth. His eyes widened. What truth, Ayanna? He knew very well which truth, but cowards always play dumb when cornered. The truth about your intentions, I clarified. What exactly did you think you were doing with her? He swallowed so hard I heard it. Then nothing. Just wide, frightened eyes staring at the floor. So I answered for him. You made her think she mattered to you. You made her believe she was special. You used her admiration like a drug. And then you expected her to stay hidden forever, tucked between business meetings and deleted messages. Kailani's breath hitched, the realization hitting her like a wave. She had not been chosen. She had been used. I continued. You fed her crumbs to keep her coming back, never giving enough to threaten your marriage, but enough for her to hope. That is what men like you do, Marcellus. You build little fantasy worlds in women who don't know better. He covered his face with both hands, exhaling shakily, elbows on his knees, as if the weight of my words pressed him into the cushions. I could see the guilt. But guilt without accountability is useless. I turned back to Kailani. Do you want to know the funniest part? She didn't answer, but her eyes lifted full of dread. I smiled. He never planned to leave me. Not for you. Not for anyone. In fact, he renewed our lease last week for another year. She blinked rapidly, confusion mixing with humiliation. He told me things were bad at home. I nodded slowly. Yes, he said that to you. He needed sympathy, a place to rest his ego, someone to tell him he was misunderstood. That doesn't mean he wanted you. She flinched as if the truth itself slapped her. I leaned forward slightly. Let me ask you something important. If my husband truly wanted you, wouldn't he have told you I was home tonight? She froze. Her lips parted soundlessly. That realization hit harder than any accusation I could make. He hadn't warned her. He hadn't prepared her. He hadn't protected her. He had sent her into the lion's den without a second thought. That is how disposable she truly was. Marcellus shifted uncomfortably, his leg bouncing again, as sweat glistened at his hairline. I could feel him unraveling under the pressure, but I wasn't done. Not even close. I stood taking slow steps around the coffee table, letting my heels echo lightly on the floor. I circled behind her, not touching, not threatening, just letting her feel my presence. Predators do not need to strike to be terrifying. Sometimes circling is enough. Kailani's breath quickened, her shoulders tightening under the tension. I stopped beside her chair, speaking softly. Did you know he was married when you first started texting? Her voice cracked into a whisper. Yes. And you still continued, I pressed. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears spilling again. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't unring a bell, I replied. Sorry doesn't erase the message you sent. Sorry doesn't erase the nights he lied to me so he could stay at the office texting you. She winced. I continued. And sorry doesn't mean you understand the damage you helped cause. She lifted her chin slightly, as if trying to find something inside herself. I didn't mean for anything to happen. I cared about him. I thought maybe he felt the same. I let her words hang. You thought wrong. She blinked, and fresh tears broke free. I moved back toward the sofa, standing directly in front of Marcellus now. He looked up at me, terrified, like he expected me to scream or break something. But my voice was colder than any scream could ever be. Tell her, Marcellus, I said. Tell her exactly what she was to you. No, Ayana, he whispered. Please don't make me tell her. She looked between us, frozen with anticipation. He shook his head slightly, crumbling. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only the two of them could hear. Tell her what you told your brother on the phone last week. His eyes shot open, horror filling them. Ayana, don't lie. Not tonight. His lips trembled. He breathed in unsteadily, looked at her, then finally spoke, voice thin and cracking. I told him she wasn't serious. I told him I wasn't serious. Her face shattered. He continued, breaking. I told him it was just attention. A distraction. Nothing real. Kailani's breath left her in a single sharp gasp, like someone had punched the air from her lungs. She covered her mouth with both hands, shoulders shaking violently. I watched her, unblinking. I didn't enjoy her pain, but I needed her to feel the truth. To heal from delusion, reality must cut deep, she whispered through trembling fingers. Marcellus shut his eyes, unable to face her, and everything inside her collapsed. Her fantasies, her hope, her pride. All of it crumbled under the weight of 6 simple words. It was never going to be you. I didn't say the sentence aloud. I didn't need to. It was written all over the room, etched into the tension, the silence, the way Marcellus couldn't look at her. When her sobs finally softened to a broken whimper, I spoke again, my voice steady as ever. Now that you know the truth, Kailani, we can decide what comes next. And the way she looked at me like a small animal, trapped under the shadow of something far larger, told me she finally understood this was only the midpoint of the night, not the end. Kailani shook her head over and over, small frantic motions that looked more like denial than thought. She was trying to rebuild a world that had just crumbled in front of her, grabbing at pieces of pride that no longer existed. I watched her attempt to assemble a narrative that would make any of this feel less humiliating. But there was no gentler version of tonight. I leaned back into the sofa, letting her sobs fill the space for a moment. The truth has a sound raw, uneven, uncomfortable, and it was echoing off the apartment walls like she was grieving something she had never actually possessed. When she finally lifted her head, mascara-smeared cheeks blotchy, her voice trembled. Was any of it real? He didn't answer. He couldn't. The silence told her everything she feared. Marcellus stared at his hands like they had betrayed him too. I watched the two of them, one shattered, one shrinking, and for the first time tonight, a strange clarity settled inside me. Betrayal wasn't a single moment. It was the accumulation of 1,000 tiny choices, each one a fracture. And tonight was simply the night all the fractures finally split open. I folded my hands in my lap. "Kailani," I said quietly, "what exactly were you hoping would happen between you and my husband?" She sucked in a sharp breath. I wasn't trying to steal him. She paused, searching for honesty that didn't make her sound foolish. I only wanted someone to want me. Someone who notices me. Someone who sees me. The irony was almost cruel, because that was the same script Marcellus had been feeding her. Two lonely people playing pretend, both believing the other had something more to give. I tilted my head. "And you thought he saw you?" She wiped her cheeks, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I did," I asked softly, "and when he went home to me every night, what did you think that meant?" Her throat closed. She couldn't answer. "So I did. It meant he liked your attention. Not your future. It meant you were convenient. Not chosen." She didn't disagree. She couldn't. Instead, she looked down again, staring at the plastic cup like it had become a metaphor for her entire position, temporary, replaceable, disposable. I took a breath and let my voice soften, not out of kindness, but out of precision. "I'm not here to destroy you, Kailani. I'm here to educate you. You walked into a role you were never equipped for. You walked into a game that wasn't designed for you to win. You saw a powerful man showing you interest and you believed that meant you were special. But all it meant was that he was weak. And you were accessible." She flinched, but she didn't argue. She couldn't. Because deep down, she knew the truth of it. I let the words sink before continuing. "You're chasing validation from men who haven't validated themselves. You're trying to earn love by offering loyalty to someone else's husband. And that will never give you the belonging you think it will." She stared at the floor, hair falling around her face like a curtain she wished she could hide behind. I crossed my arms loosely. "What you wanted wasn't a relationship. You wanted significance. You wanted to feel worth something. But you attached that desire to someone who was only ever using you to escape his own insecurities." She inhaled shakily. "I didn't know he was lying to me." I nodded once. "Because you believed everything he told you. That's what inexperience does. It makes you trust words over patterns." Kailani looked up, tears fresh again, but this time there was something else beneath them, recognition. She was beginning to see the situation for what it truly was, not what she painted it to be. Good. That was step one. Step two was harder, and it was for both of them. I stood quietly smoothing the front of my blouse as if preparing for a presentation. Marcellus's eyes followed me anxiously as I walked toward the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and pulled out 2 more glasses, porcelain ones this time. I filled them with water, returned, and placed one in front of him. He stared at it like it might bite. "Drink," I said softly. "We're not finished." He obeyed instantly. The imbalance of power was so stark it almost felt surreal. The man who once led boardrooms and teams now struggled to breathe under the weight of one woman's disappointment. I took my seat again, placing my own porcelain cup on the table. The difference between their cups wasn't lost on anyone. I took a slow sip. Now, I said calmly, we need to discuss boundaries. Kailani's head jerked up confused. Boundaries, she repeated. I nodded. Yes, because tonight you've learned the difference between attention and intention. And now I need to make sure you don't confuse the two again. She swallowed hard. I won't text him anymore. I know that. But that's not a boundary. That's the bare minimum. Marcellus exhaled shakily as if bracing himself. I looked at her directly. You will block him. Her eyes widened. Block now, I said, pulling no harshness, only certainty. She fumbled for her phone, hands trembling so badly she almost dropped it. She opened their thread and winced when the log popped up, weeks of emojis, late messages, compliments that now looked pathetic in the open. She looked at me for confirmation, and I kept my gaze steady. Block him. She pressed the button. A small click. A tiny confirmation bubble. And just like that, whatever fantasy she'd built evaporated. She set her phone down slowly on her lap, palms shaking. There, she whispered. It's done. I nodded. And now your next boundary. She stiffened. There's more. I leaned back, my voice low. You will not come to this building again. Her eyes widened, further breath hitching. I'm not trying to interfere anymore. I raised a hand lightly. This is not a conversation. This is clarity. She pressed her lips together, nodding, tears welling again. Okay, I won't come back. I nodded once, satisfied. And then came the final boundary, the one she least expected. You will not speak about this to anyone at your job. Her head snapped up. I wouldn't tell anyone. I met her eyes, letting her see how serious I was. Good. Because if you do, I will make sure the narrative includes every message, every flirtation, every picture, and every detail you so willingly participated in. Her face drained of blood. She understood. This wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The emotional scaffolding she had leaned on crumbled completely. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't special. She wasn't chosen. She was a mistake caught in the light. And I needed her to feel the weight of that reality, not to punish her, but to close the door fully. After a long moment, she whispered, voice barely there, okay? I won't say anything. I promise. Good, I said softly. Because tonight isn't about ruining you. It's about ending something that should never have started. She nodded, small and broken, but calmer now, like the storm inside her had no strength left. I let her sit in that stillness, her breathing uneven but present. Because next I would address the real traitor in the room. And he knew it. Marcellus's entire body tensed beside me, as if bracing for impact. The night for him had barely begun. Marcellus sat there like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew would not go in his favor. His knee bounced uncontrollably, his fingers twitching like he could somehow squeeze himself small enough to disappear between the sofa cushions. I watched him for a long, silent moment, letting the weight of everything sit on his shoulders without relief. The air felt heavy, charged, like the living room itself had grown sentient and was listening closely. Finally, I turned fully toward him. Your turn, I said quietly. 2 words. But the way his body jerked, you would think I had shouted fire. Kailani froze, 2 eyes flicking nervously between us, unsure whether she should stay or flee. I did not acknowledge her confusion. This part wasn't for her. Marcella swallowed hard throat, working visibly. Ayana, please. I raised one finger. Not yet. His mouth snapped shut immediately. I let him sit in that obedience for a moment, then leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. You know, I said softly, I used to wonder what betrayal would feel like if it ever found its way into our marriage. Would it feel like knives? Would it feel like drowning? Would it feel like a death? And now that I'm living inside it, I can tell you something surprising. It feels like clarity. His face twisted, not expecting that answer. I continued, voice even. Betrayal doesn't kill love. It kills illusions. And you fed me so many illusions that I genuinely forgot to look at the patterns. I saw the man who cooked dinner. The man who held me when life was heavy. The man who swore he would build a life I never had to recover from. I paused, then tilted my head. And yet, here you are. Here we are. And all that was real, he whispered. At least I cut him off with a small laugh. Real to whom, Marcellus? He dropped his gaze again, pressing his palms together as if praying. I shifted forward slightly. I'm going to ask you something, and I expect an honest answer. No crying. No excuses. No rehearsed lines about stress or temptation. He nodded. Why his forehead creased? I don't know. I didn't plan it. I shook my head slowly. No, not that answer. Why someone so young? Someone whose entire sense of worth depended on whether a man in power smiled at her. Why someone who cannot speak your language of responsibility, of commitment, of partnership? Why someone who only knows how to offer admiration, not accountability? His face broke and I saw the truth before he said a single word. Because she makes me feel wanted. I nodded once, not shocked, not moved, just confirmed. And there it is. The oldest story in the world. A man with a good life wants applause for doing the bare minimum. A man with a loving wife wants a girl who will look at him like he hung the moon. A man with stability craves the cheap high of being adored without being challenged. I tapped my finger on the arm of the sofa. You didn't cheat because she's special. You cheated because you're weak. His jaw tightened, shame flushing his cheeks. Kailani looked down, immediately understanding that weakness had shaped her humiliation too. I leaned closer to Marcellus. When you came home at night smelling like cologne, you don't wear for me anymore, walking on eggshells like a teenager hiding a hickey. You didn't even realize that the more you tried to conceal it, the more obvious it became. His eyes widened. You knew earlier, I nodded. Long before the message tonight. You left crumbs, receipts, gaps, smiles that didn't reach your eyes. A man can hide passion, but he cannot hide guilt. Marcellus covered his face with both hands, elbows on his knees, breathing rapidly. I watched him letting the silence stretch. Then I spoke again, voice calm. Tell me what you told her. He looked up sharply. Would I tell me the words? The promises. The fantasies. The lies. His lips trembled. Ayana, I said, tell me. He broke. He talked. Haltingly at first, then faster, like confessing would somehow lighten the weight crushing him. He told her he felt invisible at home, that she made him feel young again, that she understood him, that he thought about what life would be like if he had met her first. Every word cut Kailani open and stitched her back together in the wrong shape. Every word cut me too, but differently, not with pain, but with a cold, sobering understanding of who he had become. When he finished, he looked destroyed. I nodded slowly. Thank you. He blinked, confused. Why are you thanking me? I sighed. Because now I know exactly what kind of man I'm dealing with. I turned to Kailani. You can leave now. She tensed. Are you? I held up my hand. I don't need anything else from you. You learned your lesson tonight, and whether you realize it or not, you're lucky. She hesitated, glancing at Marcellus one last time, maybe hoping he would speak. He didn't. Not a word. The silence was its own answer. She stood slowly, picked up her bag, and walked toward the door. But before she could leave, I added quietly, Kailani. She turned. I hope you learn to want more than men who want less. Her eyes filled again, but she nodded gratefully and slipped out. When the door closed behind her, the apartment fell into a quiet so absolute it felt sacred. Just me and my husband. The man who had built a life with me. The man who had tried to gamble it away for attention. I looked at him, and he looked at me. And for the first time tonight, his voice came out barely a whisper. What now, Ayana? What happens now? I folded my hands in my lap, inhaled slowly, and met his eyes with a steady, unshakable calm. Now, Marcellus, we finally talk about the consequences. He sat across from me like a man waiting to hear whether he would be allowed to keep breathing. His hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white, and every few seconds his leg trembled like he couldn't control his own muscles. I let him sit in that fear not because I craved cruelty, but because accountability lives in silence. It needs stillness. It needs an audience of one. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. What did you think would happen? Marcellus, did you think I would scream? Did you think I would throw plates? Did you imagine me collapsing, begging you to stay his mouth open slightly? But nothing came out. I continued, voice even. You thought I would break. You counted on it. Because broken women are easier to control. They ask fewer questions. They apologize for your mistakes. They carry your guilt for you. I leaned back. But you miscalculated. I do not break. I sharpen. He swallowed hard. Ayana, please, I raised my hand. I am speaking. He shut his mouth instantly. I studied him, this man I had spent years believing was built from integrity and ambition. But tonight I saw something else, something smaller. Something fragile in the worst way. Do you know what hurt me the most? I asked quietly. It wasn't the cheating. Kailani was a symptom, not the disease. His eyebrows pulled together, confused. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. It was the mediocrity, the smallness, the desperation for admiration, the need to feel powerful through someone who needed you. That's what disappointed me, not the affair. The weakness. He flinched like I'd slapped him. I continued. You were not seduced by beauty or brilliance. You weren't drawn to something meaningful. You chased validation like a boy chasing attention on the playground. And you nearly burned down your own marriage for it. He rubbed his forehead, voice cracking. I don't expect you to forgive me. I want to fix this. I tilted my head. Fix. Such a convenient word. I asked gently, fix what exactly? He blinked rapidly. Us. I want to fix us. I want to earn you back. I nodded once. Then tell me this, Marcellus. Why didn't you leave me for her? His breath caught. What? Why, I repeated calmly. If she made you feel wanted, young, desired, why didn't you leave? He hesitated, and in that hesitation was the truth. I waited. Finally, he whispered, because she isn't you. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. Instead, I asked, and what am I, Marcellus? What exactly am I to you? His voice cracked. You're everything. My partner. My balance. My reason. My future. I kept my gaze on him, unblinking. If that were true, you would have protected us. You would have protected the life we built. You would have protected me. Instead, I was the last thing you considered. He inhaled shakily, trying to form words. Ayana, I made a mistake, I laughed. One mistake, a months-long affair. Secret messages. Late nights. Multiple lies. That's not a mistake, Marcellus. That's a campaign. That's a pattern. That's a lifestyle. He shut his eyes, and for a moment I saw a man who finally recognized himself, not the curated version he showed the world, but the one he tried to hide even from himself. I spoke softly. So tell me, Marcellus, what exactly do you want me to do with this truth you've given me? He looked up, eyes red. I want you to let me make it right. I shook my head slowly. No, that's not what you want. You want me to forget. You want restoration without accountability. You want comfort without consequence. You want the old Ayana, the one who loved you blindly. She's gone. His face broke. Ayana, please. I love you. The words didn't move anything in me. They landed like feathers on stone. Love is a verb, I said, and your actions removed you from that definition. He leaned forward, reaching for my hand, but I drew mine back. His fingers froze midair, then curled into a fist as he dropped them to his lap. There was something deeply pitiful in the way he deflated. Not in a way that made me want to comfort him, but in a way that made me understand something essential. He had never expected consequences. Not real ones. Not from me. Not from anyone. I took a slow breath. I am not divorcing you tonight. His head snapped up, hope flooding his expression. But I am not staying the same either. His hope flickered. What does that mean? It means there is a road back to me, but it won't be paved by your apologies. It will be paved by your transformation. I leaned closer. You will go to therapy. Weekly. No excuses. No cancellations. You will write down every lie you've told me in the last 6 months. All of them. You will show me your calendar, your accounts, your messages, your patterns. Not because I want to police you, but because I want to see who you've been when you thought I wasn't looking. His voice was barely audible. I'll do anything. Good. Because anything is what it will take. Then I added, and you will tell your boss the truth. His eyes widened. What truth? That you crossed boundaries with an intern? That you participated in something that jeopardized her career and your own? He shook his head instantly. Ayana, I lose my job. I nodded. Exactly. That is a consequence. He covered his face again. I can't, Ayana, please. I can't lose everything. My voice dropped to a whisper. You should have thought of that before you risked everything. For free attention. The room went still. Completely still. He looked at me with the expression of a man realizing the fire he started had finally reached his side of the house. The illusion was over. The game was over. And for the first time in our marriage, he understood that I held the mirror, and he would either face himself or shatter. And I wasn't sure which outcome he feared more. He sat slumped forward, his elbows on his knees, his face buried in his hands like the weight of his own choices had finally become too much to carry. For a few seconds he didn't move at all, and I wondered whether he was praying or simply trying to remember how to breathe. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red and glassy. Ayana, please. If I tell my boss, they'll fire me. They'll take my projects. My team. Everything I've worked for. I nodded slowly, emotionless. And yet you were willing to risk all of that for a 22-year-old's attention. Doesn't that tell you everything about where you truly are right now? He opened his mouth to argue, but the truth settled over him like a heavy shadow. He couldn't defend himself, not anymore. Not after tonight. I continued, my voice calm but cold. You climbed your career with discipline and ambition. But you chose your affair with impulse and ego. and the second part eats the first part alive every time. He shut his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. Watching him cry didn't soften me. If anything, it clarified how deeply he had expected me to absorb his guilt to bandage his self-inflicted wounds. That time in our marriage was over. I stood up slowly, letting the movement break the tension. He watched me rise with fear flickering behind his eyes, like he expected the next words out of my mouth to be a final sentence. Instead, I walked to the window, pulling the curtains slightly aside and staring at the dark skyline of Atlanta. The city looked so calm from up here, lights blinking like 1,000 quiet secrets. After a long pause, I said, "You know I built a life with you because I believed you were a man who would protect what we created. Not jeopardize it. Not cheapen it. Not throw it into the hands of someone who couldn't see past your paycheck or your title." The words hit him like blows. I kept going. "You used to fight for us. Remember when we shared that studio apartment with the leaky sink and the neighbors who argued every night you worked 2 jobs and still came home and cooked for me? You had nothing, but you still gave me everything. What happened to that man? Where did he go?" He stared at the floor, his voice thick. "I don't know. I think I got lazy." "Comfortable." I nodded. "Yes. Comfort is the birthplace of carelessness. And carelessness is the birthplace of betrayal." Silence stretched again. Heavy. Complete. Then I turned from the window and faced him fully. "Here's what comes next, Marcellus." He straightened, bracing himself. "I will not carry your shame. I will not manage your guilt. I will not play therapist or mother or savior to you. If you want this marriage, you will rebuild it brick by brick with honesty, humility, and transparency. And it will take years, not months, not a single apology. Years." He nodded quickly, too quickly, like a drowning man clawing at anything that floats. "I'll do it," he whispered. "I'll do whatever you ask." I walked back toward him slowly. "I'm not asking. I'm stating terms. You choose whether you agree or walk away." He stared at me as if the air had been stolen from the room. I continued, "First, you will schedule therapy. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Before midnight." He nodded, already reaching for his phone. "Second, I will have full access to your accounts, your emails, your work calendar, everything. Not because I want control, but because I want the truth. The actual truth, not the curated one you perform. Third, you will tell your boss the truth. Not the flattering version. Not the misunderstanding version. The real version." He swallowed hard, shaking. "Ayanna, please. I will lose everything." I leaned down and looked him in the eye. "You already lost me. Whatever happens to your job is the consequence of your choices." He closed his eyes again, shoulders collapsing. I sat back down on the opposite sofa and let him sit with that truth, let it seep deep into the cracks of his denial. After a long, trembling breath, he whispered, "If I do all of, if I face everything, will you stay with me, Ayanna? Will you?" I looked at him for a long moment. The desperation in his eyes was both pitiful and necessary. He needed to feel that same imbalance he'd once forced me into without hesitation. Finally, I spoke. "Love is not the question right now. Respect is. And you burned that long before tonight." His face fell. "But love can grow back. Maybe. If the soil is clean again. If the rot is cleared. If you learn how to be the man you promised to be. But you will not earn that through tears. You will not earn it through guilt. You will earn it through consistency. Through discomfort. Through accountability. through the things that actually build a man, not the fantasies that inflate a boy. He wiped his face with his sleeve. Ayana, I know. I stood again, this time walking past him toward the hallway. You don't get to speak right now. Not until your actions match your words. Not until your effort matches my pain. He turned in his seat to follow my movement, with his eyes panic rising. Where are you going? I paused at the entrance to the bedroom and looked back at him with a steady calm that made him stop breathing. I'm going to sleep in the guest room. Alone. He stood halfway, like he wanted to stop me, but he froze when he saw my expression. I added quietly, You lost the right to share my bed long before tonight. And then I closed the door to the guest room behind me and left him sitting in the living room alone with the ruins he created. For the first time in our marriage, he was living inside the consequences instead of making me carry them. And for the first time, I felt free. I did not sleep that night. Not really. I lay in the dark of the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of our apartment shifting and settling the way buildings do in the quiet hours. Every now and then, I heard him move in the living room, his pacing, his sighs, the soft thud of him sitting down again, too restless to stay still for long. But I did not go to him. I did not soothe him. His discomfort was not my emergency. Around 4 a.m., exhaustion pulled me under for a moment, a brief, heavy sleep that felt more like collapsing than resting. When I opened my eyes again, the light was dim blue, the first sign of morning creeping through the blinds. I sat up slowly. My body felt stiff, like I had aged 10 years overnight. For a moment, I just breathed deep, intentional breaths, reminding myself that I was still here, still myself, still standing in the ashes of a life I didn't choose to burn. When I stepped into the hallway, the first thing I saw was Marcellus asleep on the couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes. His head rested uncomfortably on the armrest, one arm draped across his chest, the other hanging off the side like he'd passed out in the middle of begging the universe for mercy. The sight didn't hurt. It didn't warm me either. It simply was. I walked past him into the kitchen, filling a glass with cold water, drinking it slowly as I leaned against the counter. A few minutes later, I heard him stir. He sat up abruptly when he noticed me standing there, his voice rough from sleep and crying. Ayana, he looked, wrecked eyes, swollen hair, tousled face creased from the couch cushions. And for once, I didn't feel responsible for fixing that. I didn't feel compelled to take care of him. His pain wasn't mine to manage. Morning, I said softly. The neutrality of my tone seemed to shake him even more than anger would have. He stood hesitantly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to move. Can we talk? I glanced at the clock. You have 15 minutes before you need to get ready for work. He blinked. Work? I nodded. Life doesn't pause because you made a mess of it. He swallowed hard, stepping closer. Ayana, I didn't sleep. I was scared. I kept imagining you leaving, packing your things, walking out while I was out cold on that couch. I looked at him calmly. If I were going to leave, I would have left last night. I don't sneak away in the dark. His shoulders sagged with a mixture of relief and shame. I set my glass down and crossed my arms. What do you want to say? He took a shaky breath. I made an appointment. For therapy. I booked it at 9 p.m., earliest they had. I nodded. Good. Anything else? He hesitated, then pulled his phone from his pocket and showed me the screen. His email draft was open, addressed to his boss. He let me read it. He had written a full confession. Clear, direct, brutal. No euphemisms, no excuses. The kind of honesty that strips a man down to his bones. I looked at him. You're actually going to send this? His voice cracked. If that's what it takes to fix what I broke, yes. I didn't praise him. I didn't hug him. I simply said you have until noon. Read it again. Edit it. Make sure you mean every word. If you don't send it, I'll know." He nodded, swallowing the fear rising in his throat. "Ayana, thank you for not giving up on me." I tilted my head slightly. "Don't thank me. Thank the version of you I once believed in. If he ever returns, maybe we'll find our way back." He froze at that. It wasn't meant to comfort him. It was meant to clarify the distance between us, the gap he created and now had to cross alone. I walked past him and went to the bedroom, grabbing my purse and keys. He watched me with worry. "Where are you going out?" "To breathe, to think, to remember who I am outside the chaos you brought into this home." He stepped forward like he wanted to follow, but stopped when he saw the firmness in my expression. "Will you come back?" I answered honestly. "I plan to, but I don't make promises on mornings like this." He nodded slowly, accepting the truth, as it was not as he wanted it to be. I left the apartment and stepped into the hallway. For the first time in a long time, the air felt cool and clean against my skin. I took the elevator down, ignoring the way my hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from release, from the sheer intensity of everything that had unraveled. Outside, the early morning light washed over the city. A jogger passed by. Someone walked their dog. A woman headed to work with a coffee in hand. Life was continuing as if my marriage hadn't cracked open hours earlier. And maybe that was the strangest part. The world keeps moving, even when yours freezes. I walked to a small cafe on the corner, one I loved long before my life grew heavy. I ordered a lavender latte and sat by the window watching the city wake up. For a long time, I just breathed. I allowed myself to exist without him, to feel myself without his shadow stretching across my thoughts. And there, in that small moment of peace, something inside me settled. Not forgiveness, not closure, but certainty. The certainty that I deserved truth. I deserved loyalty. I deserved a love that didn't shrink or hide or scatter at the first sign of temptation. And if he couldn't give me that, then one day I would walk away without hesitation. When I returned home, 2 hours later, Marcellus was sitting at the table with his laptop open and his head buried in his hands again, rewriting the email. He looked up when he heard me, fear and hope tangled in his expression. Did you change your mind about us?" I set my keys down slowly. "No, but I changed my mind about one thing." He tensed. "What's that? The old version of me would have tried to help you through this." I sat across from him, meeting his eyes. "This version won't. You will carry this. You will fix this. You will rebuild this if you're capable." He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off gently. "I'm not your cushion anymore, and I'm not your shield." And as those words left my lips, I felt something shift inside me between us, in the air of the home he had cracked, but not yet destroyed. The consequences had begun, and for the first time, he understood they were real. He stared at me like he was seeing a version of me he had never met before, one he couldn't charm, couldn't soothe, couldn't control. And maybe that was the truth. I had never felt more like myself than I did in that quiet kitchen, the morning light spreading across the marble countertop, while he sat there trembling under the weight of everything he'd broken. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt thick with unsaid things, regret, fear, exhaustion, the remnants of a marriage that had just survived the hardest night of its life. Then he whispered, "Ayana, do you still want this marriage?" His voice cracked on the last word, as if even asking the question hurt him. I didn't answer right away. I walked to the sink, poured myself a glass of water, and stood there for several seconds before turning back to him. "Wanting a marriage and wanting the man inside it are two different things," I said quietly. He swallowed, nodding slowly, bracing himself. I took a seat across from him. "Last night I didn't stay because I was trying to save us. I stayed because I wanted to see who you truly were under pressure. I wanted to see if you were a man who collapses or a man who confronts. He looked down, ashamed. I'm trying, I held up a hand. Trying is a start, but intention doesn't rebuild trust. Behavior does. He nodded again, slower this time, his voice barely audible. I know I failed you. I know I lied. I know I took something sacred and treated it like it was disposable. I closed my eyes for a moment. It wasn't about a girl named Kailani. It never was. It was about the space you built inside yourself where I no longer existed. The space where someone else's approval meant more than my presence. When I opened my eyes again, his were wet. I'm sorry, he whispered. Really sorry. I believed him. But belief and forgiveness are not the same thing. I said, I don't hate you, Marcellus. Hate is easy. What I feel is heavier. It's disappointment, deep bone-level disappointment. He bowed his head as though the words physically bent his spine. I continued softly, and I don't want revenge. I don't want to ruin your life or hurt your career. If I wanted destruction, last night would have gone very differently. He looked up, confused. Then why? Why make me confess to my boss? Why do all of this? I leaned back, folding my arms. Because you need consequences to grow. Not punishment growth. You can't rebuild a life on a rotten foundation. You have to tear out the rot first. His breath hitched. And you're willing to stay long enough to see if I can? He looked terrified to hope. I rested my elbows on the table. I'm willing to see who you become. That's all I can promise. His eyes filled again, relief, grief, fear, gratitude blending until he looked like a man reborn. But before he could speak, I added slow and sharp, and if the man you become doesn't align with the woman I'm becoming, I will leave. No warning. No second apology. No more nights like last night. His face collapsed and steadied at the same time. He understood. For the first time in our marriage, he truly understood. I stood grabbing my purse. You need to send that email by noon. And tonight after therapy, we talk about boundaries. Real ones. He nodded, shaking slightly. Okay. Ayana, I'll do it. I'll do everything. I believe you, I said softly. But belief isn't trust. Not yet. I turned toward the door, needing air-distant space for my own healing. He rose halfway from his seat. Will you be home later? Yes. But understand something. Home doesn't feel like home right now. You broke something inside it, so it will take time. He sat down again slowly, like the weight of his choices was pressing him back into the chair. I opened the door, but before stepping out, I added, You're not the only one rebuilding after last night. I am too, and I don't know who I'll be on the other side. His voice trembled. I hope she still chooses me. I met his eyes for one small, quiet moment. I hope you become someone worth choosing. Then I left. Down the hallway. Into the elevator. Into the morning light. And as I stepped outside, something warm spread through my chest. Not happiness, not relief, but the beginning of release. The beginning of becoming someone who would never again shrink to fit inside a man's shadow. The beginning of reclaiming the parts of myself I had abandoned without noticing. I walked slowly toward the street, breathing deeply. The city air tasted different today, not sweet, not bitter, but honest. By the time I reached the corner, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcellus. 4 words. Sent. Email. To boss. I stared at it for a long second, then put the phone in my bag. Not as a reward, not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement that for the first time in a long time, he chose a hard thing for the right reason. I kept walking. I didn't rush home. I didn't plan the evening. I didn't script the future. I just walked free, steady, whole. Because last night was not the end of our marriage. It was the end of who we used to be. And whatever came next would be built on truth. Or it wouldn't be built at all.